In this video, I'm diving into 12 signs that it's time to end an adult friendship. Let's get into it. Hey friends, Tamie, I'm Joyce here, empowerment life coach, creator of the Freedom class and the Ascension class. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. Please take a second to say hello and introduce yourself in the comments section below. And if you're back, of course, welcome back. Thanks for showing up and for tuning in. Either way, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. So let's talk about how to know when it's time to end an adult friendship. And these signs, by the way, are signs that both I and many of my clients have not only experienced, but really struggled to make sense of. Like, what the hell is going on, right? So here's the thing. Genuine healthy friendship should not be an ongoing exercise in frustration, confusion, hurt, or disappointment while you're tippy-toeing around someone else's unresolved issues for fear of rocking the boat or triggering their stuff. The stuff that they refuse to look at or address in their own lives. Nor is genuine healthy friendship about seeing someone through rose-colored glasses while overlooking and ignoring the very real hurt, discomfort, or damage that they're causing. That's not friendship, friends. Now, to be clear, this isn't about judging the people in our lives without mercy. That's not what this is. It's about an accurate assessment of your situation so you can lead a much happier, healthier, peaceful, and free life without the unnecessary frustration, disappointment, and hurt that some people bring to the table while they call themselves your friend. Meanwhile, when we look at the big picture and get darn honest with ourselves, we can see that there is plenty going on that is anything but friendly. And no question, acknowledging this can be hard because, let's face it, we don't give up on our friendships lightly, do we? And this is especially tough when we're talking about friendships we've had in our life for many, many years, if not decades. Regardless, although navigating adult friendships can be tricky, and when red flags appear, we can want to overlook the obvious and just let things go, even to our detriment, because of the history we have with these people. And while the history we have with another person can be something we hold dear, make no mistake, it is a problem when it becomes the only thing keeping the friendship alive. So with all of that said, let's start with the most obvious deal breakers before we move on to the trickier stuff that we sometimes have to contend with, the stuff that can be more difficult to understand, but should in reality cause us to seriously reevaluate our adult friendships. 12 signs it's time to end an adult friendship. Number 1, blatant disrespect. Let's face it, friends, there is nothing friendly about blatant disrespect, no matter how passive or aggressive the disrespect may be. Whether it's stonewalling with the silent treatment, unprovoked or unwarranted contempt and disdain, mocking, or otherwise trying to belittle, invalidate, shame, or humiliate you. Needless to say, all of these behaviors are absolutely unacceptable and a no-go in any relationship, not least of which someone whom you're extending the gift of your friendship. Also on the list of absolutely unacceptable are consistent and persistent impatience, intolerance, and irritability, as well as unreliability. This includes underhanded comments, cheap shots, snide remarks, mean-spirited sarcasm, along with having no issue blowing you off. And I think it goes without saying that personal attacks, yelling and screaming, are absolute deal breakers and a crystal clear indication that it's time to end the relationship, the friendship, like immediately. Number 2, gossip. That's right. You know they can't be trusted by virtue of the fact that they repeatedly show you that they can't be trusted. And one way they do this is by gossiping about others in front of you. And in case you haven't figured this out yet, you need to know, if they'll gossip with you, they will gossip about you. So do not ignore this red flag. When it comes to people who gossip about others, usually whoever happens to not be in the room, you've got to know that's you when you're not around. These are not only people who will not be able to keep your confidences, they are also people who will use your disclosures against you and maybe even twist, distort, and embellish while they're at it. And this will be especially true when you don't fall into line or, God forbid, take issue with something that's not working in the friendship, like, for example, their toxic gossips. So again, do not ignore this red flag. Have the wisdom and discernment to, at the very least, keep your distance. If not, walk away from the friendship altogether. You'll probably save yourself a whole lot of unnecessary grief in the long run. Sign number 3, they're critical of you. Even if secretly, covertly, and behind your back, you know you're being judged harshly and perhaps even without mercy because you sense it, you can feel it. Even if they smile nicely to your face, you know by what they don't do and don't say as much as by what they do. Now, to be clear, there is a big difference between judgment and discernment. Judgment has a toxic tone, a level of criticism and condemnation attached to it, while discernment, on the other hand, is simply an accurate assessment of what you're observing or experiencing in any given situation. In other words, you are not necessarily judging your friend when you observe and therefore have to acknowledge that there are some really unhealthy dynamics at play in the friendship. That's not being judgmental. That is seeing it for what it is and maybe even speaking up about it if you value the friendship enough to do so. That isn't judgment, friends. That is discerning that a thing is a thing and being honest with yourself and, where appropriate, others, about what you see and how you feel about it, period. Your friends may very well know you well enough to know your struggles, shortcomings, and character flaws. We all have them. They may even see and discern areas where you could grow and improve. And they should be able to do that without excessive judgment. In other words, without criticism and condemnation. What healthy friends don't do is judge one another without mercy. And to be clear, this is how toxic and unhealthy friends will try to position themselves as superior, even if only in their own mind, but also in the minds of those they have any sway or influence over, those whose perceptions they're able to manipulate. Number 4, they invalidate you. No matter what you feel or why, you'll be met with some form of invalidation. Either your feelings make no sense to them and therefore you shouldn't feel that way, or you've got it all wrong, especially if it you're discussing has anything to do with them. They may even go so far as outright denying saying or doing something you both know full well was said or done, and when that fails, you'll be told you're just too sensitive. Sign number 5, that it's time to end an adult friendship, is a big one. When it's clear that you can't communicate openly with your friends, that is not a red flag that you should be ignoring. If, in order to survive the friendship, you have to tippy-toe around them and their unresolved issues for fear of saying something that might set them off, you have to look at that. Why are you walking on eggshells around someone you call your friend? Healthy friendships are safe and comfortable and don't require you to weigh every word in advance to be sure you don't accidentally trigger their stuff. Worse yet, if there is a legitimate issue that needs to be addressed and you know you can't communicate openly with them because they've either told you straight out that they aren't open to it, or you know full well they aren't going to be able to handle the honesty or any kind of feedback, no matter how respectfully it would be delivered, any perceived criticism is going to cause them to either become super defensive or attempt to gaslight you, or both. And you know this because there's a long history of them taking everything so personally. And as such, they get uber defensive at even the slightest hint of perceived criticism. Not criticism, perceived criticism, or any kind of feedback. Listen, if your relationship can't survive the truth, or any open dialogue in an attempt to resolve the discomfort or sheer frustration you're feeling in this friendship, it's time to consider your options. How long should you go on shrinking, making yourself small, swallowing what really needs to be said, and pretending the big pink elephant isn't in the room? If in order to survive the friendship, or if in order for the friendship to survive, you have to censor yourself at every turn, you have to shrink, play small, and consider everything you say before you say it. In other words, if the friendship cannot survive the truth, and or you can't be your whole self in the presence of this person, then friends, it may very well be time to end the friendship. In fact, you may be long overdue. If speaking your truth means being on the receiving end of deflection, blame shifting, projection, and gaslighting, whenever you attempt to bring anything to their attention that they don't want to hear, that is a big red flag, which leads me to my next point. Sign number 6. They gaslight you. And a major way they'll attempt to do this is by always managing to find a way to make you the issue or the problem. No matter what has gone on in the friendship or how valid and legitimate your concerns may be. If you dare to raise an issue, again, no matter how valid, you're for sure going to be the issue. Naturally, because if the issue isn't you, then who might it be? And for those of you who aren't sure exactly what I mean by the term gaslighting, gaslighting is fundamentally the withholding of information or pretending they don't understand what you're talking about for no other reason than to deflect responsibility while causing you to question your perception of reality as well as your own good judgment. Gaslighters project their issues onto you in order to divert attention away from their dysfunction or wrongdoing. And they will even go so far as to deny that something has taken place, even in the face of clear evidence. At its core, gaslighting is a really sick self-preservation tool, and the people who use it don't care who they're hurting in the process, so long as they get to sidestep any responsibility or accountability. So make no mistake, it is an incredibly mean-spirited way to attempt to distort a person's reality through lies and manipulation. In fact, gaslighting is pure manipulation, as well as deception. And at its core, manipulation is a form of lying. Gaslighting is also emotional abuse, truly. No matter who is doing the gaslighting or how well-intended they may appear to be. At the very core of all emotional abuse, including gaslighting, is self-preservation. And emotional abusers only look to preserve and protect themselves, especially when you're shining a light on anything that isn't flattering. Anything they'd prefer you allow to just go unnoticed. And certainly it can be really difficult and confusing when there's some good stuff there. The good that keeps you in the game with these people. But here's the thing. When the but or the extra becomes so big or so repetitive that it's now become fully impossible to ignore, we have to surrender to the reality of who and what we're dealing with. And probably what we've always been dealing with, but just didn't want to see for what it is, given how disappointing and heartbreaking it can be to have to acknowledge the truth of the matter. Now, comment below and let me know whether or not you can relate to any of this. Let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you'd like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in one of my coaching programs, there's a link in the description below this video where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. And in addition, there's also a new free gift section below in the description below this video. So be sure to avail yourself of that as well. Sign number 7, they won't respect your boundaries. Like, for example, they will not take no for an answer. In fact, they'll take your setting a boundary as a personal slight towards them, but then fully expect you to respect any boundary or limits they have. They believe that you should go along with whatever they want or prefer without question or resistance. Your own wants, needs, preferences, or desires, not on their radar. And when you won't just go along to get along, you're met with a manipulative comment designed specifically to disregard your preferences, needs, and limits, and shame you into feeling like you're the bad or wrong one in the dynamic. People who behave this way are not our friends. Sign number 8, they aren't supportive. When your so-called friend cannot or will not acknowledge your achievements, accomplishments, or milestones, major or otherwise, they don't or can't support you, your endeavors or accomplishments, you do not feel seen, never mind heard or understood. And it's clear that for whatever reason, they cannot demonstrate even a smidgen of support or acknowledgement on your behalf, or if they do, it's begrudgingly. Listen, silence has a sound, and sometimes that sound is loud. Pay attention to who's not clapping when you're winning. That is a lot of information. Now, if you suspect the reason they can't show any real support is they're secretly competing with you, or they're resentful of your growth and the good that you're creating in your life, friends, that person is not your friend, no matter how much they may claim otherwise. Envy, jealousy, a competitive spirit, and resentment, these things have no place in healthy friendships. None. Again, that is a lot of information. Don't ignore it. And naturally, it hurts when we love people who do not have the capacity to see us, understand us, cheer for us the way we would them, not to mention being unable to genuinely love us back. Naturally, it hurts when we're facing that fact, and that's okay. But for goodness sake, love yourself enough to hold a higher standard in your life. I promise you, in the end, you'll be glad you did. Sign number 9, it's time to end an adult friendship. They lack empathy. Now, to be clear, they may very well fake empathy with their sweet, high-pitched voice, feigned sincerity, and lovey-dovey gushing all over the place. But that's not empathy. That's an act, a performance. When push comes to shove and they can't fake it anymore, it's clear that they don't actually care about your feelings, your experience, or what you're going through, especially if it inconvenienced them, or worse, pertains to them. You know full well you're dealing with someone who is empathy impaired, at least where you're concerned, and you know this by virtue of your experience. There's been a pattern of empathy impairment over time. And the truth is, friends who are empathy impaired may very well be a total blast to hang out with in certain situations. But be clear, this is not a place to invest your heart. Their lack of empathy will inevitably hurt you, repeatedly. And you'll not only be blamed for the hurt their lack of empathy has caused, but you'll be criticized for the very legitimate feelings you have while they show little to no remorse. So be wise and put some healthy distance between you and anyone you know full well does not have genuine empathy for you before that happens. Again, you'll be glad you did. Sign number 10 is the relationship is very one-sided, meaning you're the one doing all the work, all the heavy lifting. And if you stop putting in the effort, the relationship will die. Here's the thing. When you and your effort are the only thing keeping a relationship alive, it's time to reevaluate. I once kindly, gently, and quite lovingly, I might add, pointed out to someone I really, really loved, a truly important person in my life at the time, that I was the only one making any effort in the relationship. And what I got in response was, well, I'm not a caller. I'm not a caller. What does that even mean? Friends, that is a lot of information. And it speaks to an enormous sense of entitlement that this person brings to her relationships that should give anyone pause. People who expect you to do all the heavy lifting, make the calls, travel across town, put in all the effort, these are not your friends, nor are they relations who genuinely care about or value you. And in my view, they don't deserve your good heart, period. Why? Because showing up with your whole heart for someone who is incapable of meeting you or reciprocating in any real way is hard, painful. So how long are you going to continue to do that to yourself? And why exactly? What more do you need to know? When you and your effort are the only thing keeping the friendship alive, it's time to take a good long look at that and consider your options. Sign number 11, they can't apologize. Instead, they're smug or hyper-defensive while they deflect, justify, rationalize, and shift blame. When you're dealing with someone who cannot and will not look at themselves and the part they play in the quality of the friendship, nothing is ever their fault. And if you ever try to argue otherwise, if you dare to challenge them in any way or bring to light any problem you may have, and all you are met with in return is justification, rationalization, hyperdefensiveness, and blame shifting, not only can they not accept responsibility for the effect or impact that their choices, attitudes, or behavior are having on you, but it's clear that they are fundamentally incapable of apologizing. Saying the words "I'm sorry" would be like death to them, because in a very real way it is. It is an ego death, death to the false persona and false image of perfection and superiority that they work so hard to portray. And listen, no one should have to apologize when they legitimately feel they have nothing to apologize for. That's not what I'm talking about. In the case of the friend we're discussing in this video, it's not about apologizing for something they legitimately do not feel they're responsible for. Rather, it's about avoiding accountability and responsibility at all costs, even at the cost of the friendship. That's a lot of info, friends. Reasonably healthy, kind, decent, and loving people don't do that to their friends. Rather, they take responsibility for their stuff, the part they play, and they work it out. So, when your friend has shown you over time that they are fully unable or unwilling to look at their part, own their stuff, ever, they're too busy justifying, rationalizing, and defending themselves and their own behavior to be able to take a moment to consider you and your feelings. That is a huge indicator that you're in the wrong room and it's time now to end the friendship. The truth is, some people cannot and will not look at themselves. Nothing is ever going to be their fault. And if you ever try to argue otherwise, you will be met with, among other things, an impenetrable wall of "I'm right, you're wrong, and that's the end of it." And there is nothing friendly, loving, or kind about that, friends. And last but not least, number 12. They're not on the same growth path. And the discrepancy, or vast chasm, between your levels of personal growth, healing, and emotional intelligence are clearly a problem. No matter how hard you try to be patient, kind, and tolerant, your growth, your healing, your recovery is clearly very triggering for them. When you commit to a healing and recovery path, when you are passionate about personal development, trying to maintain a friendship with someone who has zero recovery under their belt, but really needs it, someone who has zero interest in healing or growth or personal development whatsoever, well, needless to say, trying to maintain a healthy, functional, or even satisfying friendship is going to be like trying to run a marathon with someone who's on crutches. No judgment. But if that's where they're at in terms of vital growth factors like codependency recovery, adult-child syndrome healing and recovery, personal growth and development in general, and these are an integral part of who you are going to have a very difficult time in this friendship. In my experience, your growth, your development, your healing and recovery may very well be something they resent. You've had the courage and the strength to go there, and they haven't. And if they need it, and they know it, they can kid themselves all they want. Simply by virtue of who you are and where you're at, you are going to trigger the bleep out of them, and you'll be blamed. So if this one resonates with you, it might be time to surrender to what may very well be the painful reality that you are simply no longer a match. We can and do outgrow our friends sometimes, and it's okay to outgrow people. Let go with love, grieve the loss, and move on. Much healthier and more aligned friends await you, I promise you. Don't stay stuck in relationships with people who cannot see you, validate you, cheer and clap for you when you win, because they're too resentful of your growth to be able to be genuinely happy for you, not to mention proud of you and all that you've overcome. I have learned that no different than how my sober recovery was very triggering for my addicted brother, in the very same way my codependency and adult child healing and recovery has been very triggering for the people in my life who are in desperate need of healing and recovery, yet somehow are fully unable or unwilling to do that work. Same goes for my passion for personal growth and development. It's no different. Sometimes the more we evolve in these areas, the more terrified others become of what we embody and represent and what that might say or mean about them. It's not our stuff. And on that note, I'm going to call it a wrap. But before I go, you should know the Ascension class is open for enrollment. Now, this is for you if you're ready and able to invest in yourself, you're ready to shift your identity, master the law of attraction, heal your relationship with money, and put a full stop end to the limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging behaviors that are holding you back and preventing you from living your best life. If you're ready to reinvent yourself from the inside out, create your dream life by design, and finally become the you were always meant to be, click the link in the description below this video to apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team.